Thanks for taking some time out of your day to check out this talk. I'm Anna Amici from Lab Zero, and today I'll be talking about some common scenarios and pitfalls that crop up as designers work to integrate themselves into new team settings. But before we dive into some of these problems and tactics for addressing them, a little bit about myself. That's me. I've got 8 years of experience working in the design field. I began my career working at a small agency in Hong Kong doing marketing and web design work before moving to the Bay Area and Lab Zero a few years ago. I primarily work as an individual contributor in small team environments, but part of that role is also helping to foster a good design process and team collaboration on the projects that I'm on. At Lab Zero, we're not just designers, but we offer the full suite of product design and engineering services for clients of all sizes. Depending on the client and the project, we can lend our expertise and leadership in an advisory role, or we can integrate as full members of the project team. As for clients, here's a selection of companies that we worked with over the years. It's been really great to have these long-lasting partnerships with many of these companies, where we've been able to see their products grow and improve over months and years. But for now, let's get into the topic that I'm here to talk about. So as a designer on a new team, there's always that desire to prove your value and earn a client's trust quickly. But how do you balance that with the slow ramp up needed to even understand the product first, before you can start producing value with your designs? And worse, what if your team is in that startup-y, build first, fix later type mindset? How do you transition from feature design to a more equal partnership with product engineering and stakeholders? Well, in recent projects, we've followed some of these principles to integrate into our clients' teams and steer those relationships towards a more ideal partnership. The first principle is to make planning visible. Many of these principles will probably seem pretty basic, but I think, as we all know, projects don't always go according to plan, and it's nice to have a bit of a refresher on best practices every now and again. With that said, how do we keep our plans visible and not work in silos? First off, get to know the makeup of your team. Hopefully, you're not the only designer at the company, so any other designer should be your first point of reference. From there, see if there's a design sprint board and how well, or maybe not so well, it's aligned to the engineering team's sprint cadence. Try to figure out what the life cycle of a design ticket looks like. They don't behave like engineering tickets, often sticking around longer and going through a more lengthy review process. And at the end of that life cycle, how are they transformed into engineering tickets? The first step to addressing any of these issues is to make sure that you actually have a sprint board in place. On a recent project, the design board was set up in a Kanban style, which meant that the backlog was always visible. Moving those tickets off the board kept our focus on what we were actually working on any given time. Now, design tickets might not move as fast as engineering tickets, but you should still make sure that they're properly detailed with work in progress designs and links to research or associated engineering tickets. Just because you won't be moving things around as often doesn't mean you shouldn't keep that board up to date. Now that you've got a handle on the work that you're doing, how do you get to know the work that the rest of the team is doing? Well, in the worst case, where you're not actively invited into the planning process, not only are others unsure of your workload, but you run the risk of being informed of design needs only once they're urgently needed. If it seems like you're going down that road, then you'll have some self-advocacy to do. You might have to ask around to find out when planning meetings are, but getting your foot in the door there means you'll know the best times and places to start sharing in-progress work. With the engineers on your team, be proactive and get involved in the process of breaking down designs to tickets. And when scope inevitably needs to be cut, make sure you're at the table and are part of any design decisions being made. While I've already brought up the importance of getting yourself into the right meetings, for things like daily stand-ups, you do want to build in some flexibility for these. Meaning that, while time-boxing meetings with lots of participants can keep everyone on topic, smaller meetings with your product design engineering team should be more flexible. Instead of constantly scheduling new meetings to continue the conversation, a flexible length stand-up can accommodate whatever needs to be discussed on a given day, and most importantly, keeps everyone in the context of the work, instead of needing to switch in and out of a design mode. Of course, the caveat needs to be said that this very much depends on the work culture and your teammates' schedules, so adapt as necessary. Outside of recurring team meetings, you want to make sure that the stakeholders elsewhere in the organization are also brought in at the right time with the right context. Imagine you're at a final review meeting and a stakeholder from a different team brings up actually a pretty good idea. It would improve the feature that you're working on, but there's not enough time left to adjust the designs and rewrite the code. What do you do? Do you delay the feature release? Do you launch a substandard product? It's happened to me, and there's no real good answer. Ideally, you don't get yourself in this position in the first place. And that's through pulling in stakeholders as early as possible. When having these meetings, it's vital to set context, meaning project goals, scope, and status. Get them up to speed quickly and as concisely as possible. Then address any user, data, engineering, or other complexities that may impact their areas of expertise. Keep an ear out for any misalignment and bring it up as soon as possible. Now, whether you're in a meeting or conducting research, how you ask your questions is almost as important as what you ask. For example, if you're trying to challenge longstanding assumptions, keeping a neutral and curious tone helps put people at ease. Asking simple questions, especially from an outsider's perspective, feels less threatening. This should be a conversation, not an interview or an interrogation. And if you're going through designs or a prototype with somebody who doesn't quite understand what to do, try asking what's catching their attention, or if there's anything in particular they're trying to figure out. On the other hand, if someone seems to be blazing through your designs without bringing up any questions, maybe they're already familiar with a very similarly designed product. Try to dig into that and find out what's making it so easy for them. Now, these next two principles will touch a bit more on the process of design creation and file management. As a feature is being developed, there's going to be a lot of back and forth between the designer and the PM. As specs are being written and project objectives inevitably change, how do you keep your designs aligned? Not to mention keeping everything straight within your own head while possibly working on multiple design initiatives at once. Well, the ideal process is that a project manager updates the written specs, the designer updates the designs, and the engineer works on the tech spec and tickets. But you don't have to delineate these tasks super strictly. Everyone should be checking and integrating into each other's work. And specifically for your design updates, you don't need to document every single tweak or iteration. Part of your design expertise should be knowing the right time to share work. And related to the overall process is also how you structure your own work. Coming onto a new project, you're probably going to be encountering some design debt. Or, if you're lucky, a lot of design debt. This won't just show up in how files are laid out, though that is part of it. You may notice that engineers are always asking after the latest design files, or that tickets are being written based on earlier iterations of designs. In that case, you've got a little bit of work to do. If, as was the case on a recent project, all the designs are in one big file, you should probably start by splitting things apart by initiative or epic or however work is chunked up. Within your files, make sure to clearly indicate which work is ready for dev, which is still in progress. This can take the form of how you name files or pages, as well as how you group and label the designs on the page. And for designs that have been scrapped or are no longer current, separate them onto another page or archive file. And of course, I saved the most fun principle for last. This one's all about keeping your design brain fresh with some UX exercises, especially if you're working on a situation where you don't otherwise have many options for free-form exploration. It can be frustrating to work without much allowance for creativity, but sometimes those are just the things we end up working on. If you're lucky, you might get some hack day projects a few times a year, but if not, you can still make the best of your situation. Before starting on anything new, make sure you do have the time and authority to take on a little extra work. Then find a small slice of the product to work on that you think could have an outsized impact. Maybe it's a date picker, or an issue with color contrast, or important info being hidden behind hover states. Yes, I've had to work on all these. Next, ask around to see if you can figure out the root of the problem. Maybe somebody already tried to fix it in the past and it's just buried in the backlog somewhere, or maybe it's a framework's default design that nobody bothered to change. Now, make sure you time box this, but if you frame your exploration in terms of customer needs and business goals, you should be able to get needed stakeholders on your side. Understandably, development time is what all initiatives come down to. But assuming you manage to get the right people on board, you can start to work with the engineering team to get your exploration into the product. This may be as its own standalone feature, or you may find that your work fits into an existing or future epic. In that case, congrats! Not only did you get to work on something fun, but you hopefully made a good impression on your team and your stakeholders, and how you were able to advocate for and push through your own initiative. So many of these principles have probably seemed pretty common sense. So if you're already using them in your own work, that's great. But I know for myself that it's still helpful to get a reminder now and again. In that case, I hope this has been a useful presentation and that you can apply some of these principles the next time you're ramping up on a new project. Thanks for taking the time to watch this talk. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at LabZero, and happy designing!